Hello and welcome once again to the It's a Frankly Harry podcast. It's your host Frank Weber welcoming you back to the forest. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about politics if I could, and not in the way that you might otherwise think. I was just on vacation and my mind is always aglow with all these ideas and all these things that I could talk about or write about. And the subject came up in my mind that there's a lot of things that you could talk about politics and actually to some extent religion, two of the big controversial things that you shouldn't really be throwing out there to just anybody. They say that was the traditional belief anyway. There's actually a lot of things that you can talk about in those that are really not that controversial. Meaning that you don't have to necessarily talk about a particular policy or individual or even a belief or a doctrine. And so that's kind of what I'm going to try to do today. But that was several days ago, and actually close to a week ago, I wrote down a bunch of stuff, and I usually don't prepare a ton for this podcast. I mean, I jot down some ideas but I kind of over prepared on my previous podcast, Frank Weber's Party, so I'm probably just gonna kind of give you an overview and not really go point by point here, although I plan, of course, for this podcast to be on a long time in some format and some capacity, so we'll probably get to a lot of this stuff at some point. For me, I've always been interested in politics because it looks like this values-based profession where people the elected leaders, could do a lot of good and actually solve a lot of problems. But I wind up hating it because ultimately they don't. They pass legislation that is hard to understand, or it's tied to some other pork projects, or it was designed based on some sort of groupthink. And it's really sad because there was a time when I was younger and more youthfully invigorated and whatnot when I thought about, I kind of like to run for office someday. Even if it was just for 1 or 2 terms, and that idea quickly went away with all the public scrutiny and criticism that they have to deal with. But it's strange. One of the things that we have in common, you can disagree on the issues, but it seems like most people typically hate politicians, kind of like they strongly dislike lawyers, and so there's a lot of jokes for both politicians and lawyers in that regard. But one of the things that really bothers me, though, is as human beings, we have an opportunity to do so much good and to do so much better than we really do, and the profession of politics seems to be that one profession that just not only misses the mark, but seems to miss it mightily. And it's really nuts in that regard. I was listening to, like I said, I don't really want to plug other people's podcasts, but I plug them if they're good thinkers and entertaining and interesting. But there's a young man, probably about 10 years younger than I am, named Zuby, who's a rapper and a very great thinker. I don't know how long he's had his podcast. I think he said Real Talk with Zuby. He was talking the other day about qualities that make a great leader. I can't remember all of them. I know one of them was benevolence, which I think a lot of politicians don't have anymore. But the biggest thing, there was like 2 others that he talked about as well, but the biggest thing that he said during the show, and I've said many, many a time, life is hard enough, and if you have people making decisions that could potentially affect your life and make life even harder for you, then that's very bothersome, and those of us out here are not very appreciative of it. So anyway, it's crazy stuff. Obviously, you can get really down and dirty into it. You get into cable news networks. This network leans this way. This network leans that way. Most people, I think, feel worse watching those news channels, actually, on politics. And, of course, they delve truly deep into those issues. So, anyway, I hope I don't sound like I'm rambling. I think I say that every episode. I'm just kind of giving my 2 cents on that. I will tell you that, a lot of legislation over the years doesn't make a lot of sense. Like I said, I think there's a lot of groupthink, or people, they're on one path, but they don't consider other paths. It's really a mess up there. I don't know. I really wish I could snap my fingers and get them to do everything that I think most of us want them to do. But it's a really, really tricky thing. I will tell you, just to give you a couple of things, I'll give you one tidbit on politics and one tidbit on religion real quick, neither one of which are controversial. And then I may slightly get into more controversial things after that. But anyway, there's a belief out there, and I've heard this from a couple of different people, but you don't hear it very often. But like the people working at the Capitol, the House and the Senate, for instance, they may bitterly fight on the floor of their chamber, but there's the belief that they, once they're out of public view, they go out to dinner together and drink together, and it's actually a kayfabe environment, very similar to professional wrestling, and it apparently goes back a number of years. Apparently, even President Reagan and Speaker of the House back then, Tip O'Neill, were very bitter. Well, maybe not really bitter, but they fought each other politically, but then they were always, the Reagans always had Tip O'Neill and his family over at the White House for dinner and everything, and they were best buds. So even pre-internet era, they had this kayfabe professional wrestling persona to them. So I think that it confuses a lot of people and kind of bothers them as well. But I thought that was always kind of funny to mention that. And now this isn't really, I was going to mention here, as far as religion goes, I just wanted to point out this idea here real quick. But so I know Christianity, I know that the most. I spend time in church every week for many years. One of the things that I would like to see from the different denominations is an appreciation that a great big world religion like Christianity, with so many diverse people and an unlimited potential in terms of views, and again, diverse views as well, that each denomination could realize that spirituality is very individual, and people have all these different options for where they might be able to go to church. And so I wish they would realize that the individual needs to go where they are most spiritually fed, I guess I would say. Not to say you need to go to church here because we're right. fortunately, and that's why I think having different denominations is best for Christianity and the other great world religions for that matter, if that makes sense to you. I hope it makes sense to you, but each denomination believes that they're right and nobody else is right, so they always say, well, you need to come to church with us. But like I said, different individual spirituality with a lot of diversity in that particular great religion means that people have choices. And that's true in the other world religions as well, when they have denominations and sects, meaning sects, not sex, Anyway, so I just wanted to put those forward to you for now. At some point, I was going to talk about this election coming up in November, and there are people out there who still think that it's going to change in some character before then. I mean, this is June 19th as I record this. I don't really know what's going to happen. I would think if this was a pre-internet, with the media being a little less volatile or hostile, I would have to think that Biden would lose, and the polling suggests that right now as well. And speaking of Biden, of course, he, going back many years, didn't even get the nomination for president when he ran. 1988, I know, was one of them. Not a big fan of Trump's personality and his craziness a lot of times, but it wasn't really bad guy in terms of policy. This crazy trial that he had a few weeks ago, a lot of people are having trouble for what he actually did wrong, or anything that was illegal. It reminded me a little bit of, seeing this is historical context, some of which I just mentioned here, but there was apparently I remember a governor's election in Louisiana that got nationwide attention. I think it was back in 1991. I'm trying to remember the guys' names. And it was basically a foreshadowing of future elections and people not getting really the best candidate on either side that they could get. But one of them was David Dukes, who was a former Ku Klux Klan leader, and he was running against the other guy. I don't remember his name, but he was a white-collar criminal, I think, maybe like an embezzler or something. And even at, 13? How old was I, 13 or 14? I correctly predicted that David Dukes, the Klan guy, was too unpalatable. He was going to lose. And the other guy did, in fact, win. And I said, well, he's going to win because, a lot of politicians are white-collar criminals anyway. I mean, you see them, doing the insider trading in Congress, and that and lobbyists is how they get rich. So the white-collar criminal, in fact, won. And so that this election kind of reminds me a little bit about that. But ultimately, people need to be voting based on policy and not personality, and do their own research, make their own decisions. That's all there really is to it. Hopefully you're not a one-issue voter either. I know I've been talking, it looks like I've been talking over 14 minutes already. Still working hard on this podcast, still trying to take it in directions, having a guest or whatever, still working on that, still trying to make some contacts. Just to go out on a high note, hopefully that politics stuff wasn't too gloomy. I could have said so many other things there. So I was back home on Sunday, and I managed to catch the end of the men's U.S. Open. Now, so far, I haven't talked too much about men's golf, but I watched like the final hole, and I didn't realize until Monday the significance of what actually happened there. Which, there was like. So I tuned in for the final hole, which I looked like it was a par 5, and there was like 3 or 4 guys who were in contention there. And ultimately, it came down to Bryson DeChambeau, who is now on the Live Tour, Saudi Arabia funded, against Rory McIlroy, who is a big pro PGA Tour guy, because they have this split in men's golf now, in case you haven't known, for a couple of years. And the Saudis have been financing the Live Tour in a big way, lots of big money, but a little bit more, seems like a little bit more freedom and some more exotic locales for those golfers, more team golf, more relaxed rules, like they can wear shorts and stuff like that. Hold on a second. But anyway, Rory was a big vocal guy in favor of PGA Tour, and Bryson left and went to LIV. So anyway, the big U.S. Open came down to those two, and Rory missed a short putt that was very curvaceous. Probably would have been easy to miss. Still birdied the hole, but that wound up costing him the tournament. Bryson hit into a hazard, but managed to get out of it, and I think still eagled the hole or whatever. It must have been a par 5, because I thought there was like, how is there any way they're gaining strokes there in a positive way? Excuse me, I caught this cold on this cruise I was on. But anyway, Bryson wound up winning, and I thought it was kind of poetic, because I think Rory McIlroy and Tiger Woods, even though we don't see as much of Tiger anymore, I think they're both kind of whiny little bitches who should probably be butt buddies with each other. As opposed to, say, someone like Jack Nicklaus, who is also pro PGA Tour, but is willing to be classy about it and say, I'm going to disagree with you on that in a friendly and, like I said, classy way. But those two, I just thought it was poetic that Bryson defeated him and in that fashion. And Rory says now that he's taken a few weeks off of golf. I guess good for him. But anyway, I just thought that was interesting. I don't know if he and Tiger are still doing that. What is it that? Oh shit! What is that? They were trying to do something to augment the PGA's offerings, like a golf skills test, kind of like what the NFL is doing now during their Pro Bowl week, like to show for the fans golf skills test, or what is essentially watching guys practice golf. And it was really weird to me because, like I said on this show, George Carlin said years ago that watching golf is like watching flies fuck. Then watching guys practice golf, what is that like? Something obviously much, much worse. But I don't know. I haven't heard of that come to fruition. I don't think that would really work in golf, although there's a lot of people in the tank for Tiger and maybe to some extent Rory. But anyway, I got a kick out of the end of that U.S. Open and really enjoyed seeing that. Didn't really know exactly the full impact of it, though, till Monday. So I don't know. I think in my older age, I'm not really understanding completely what was going on. Sometimes it takes a while for things to sink in. Anyway, that's about all I have this week for It's a Frankly Harry podcast. I would really love to hear from you more than anything else. show is still evolving. I hope you're telling your family and friends and hitting that subscribe button. I think it's doing a little better than the old show, Frank Weber's Party. And it would be nothing without you. So drop me a line and tell me what you'd like to hear about. You know, I am going to put music back in here eventually and video as well. And anyway, until next time, this is Frank Weber. I am planning on doing a bonus episode on my vacation, my cruise there, which will probably come out before this, but look for that as well. Anyway, Frank Weber signing off. I love you. See you next week. Leaving the forest now from It's a Frankly Harry podcast.